The Endeavour tumbled through space like a broken bird, its hull cracked and bleeding atmosphere into the void. Captain Jack Miller watched the oxygen readings drop on his flickering display screen. 23 hours. That's all they had left before his crew of 42 would start suffocating. "Captain, we're picking up something on long-range sensors," called out Lieutenant Kate Wilson from her communication station. Her voice stayed steady despite the sparks flying from damaged panels around her. Jack pulled himself toward the main view screen using the emergency handholds. The artificial gravity had failed 12 hours ago when the reactor containment field started breaking apart. Through the static-filled display, he could see shapes moving toward them. Big shapes. "Holy hell," whispered Chief Engineer Mike Torres, floating beside a burnt-out control panel. "Those ships are massive." The alien vessels looked like floating cathedrals made of crystal and metal. Each one was easily 10 times the size of the Endeavour star. They moved with impossible grace, gliding through space without any visible engines or exhaust. Blue lights pulsed along their surfaces in patterns that seemed almost alive. "They are scanning us," Kate reported. "Energy signatures I've never seen before." Jack straightened his torn uniform and tried to look like a captain instead of a survivor. "Open a channel. All frequencies. This is Captain Jack Miller of the Earth vessel Endeavour star. We have critical damage and request assistance." The response came faster than expected. A new voice filled the bridge, speaking perfect English through their damaged speakers. "Human vessel, this is Commander Vex of the Altran Republic. We have analyzed your situation. Prepare to be rescued." Before Jack could respond, a gentle blue glow surrounded his ship. The Endeavour stopped tumbling, held steady by some kind of invisible force. Through the main screen, they watched as one of the crystal ships grew larger, its belly opening like a mechanical flower to reveal a docking bay that could hold 20 ships their size. "Sir," Torres said quietly, "they're pulling us inside without even asking." Jack nodded grimly. They didn't have much choice anyway. The docking process was smoother than anything human technology could manage. The Endeavour settled onto a landing platform that adjusted itself perfectly to their ship's shape. Breathable atmosphere filled the bay immediately, and gravity generators created a comfortable environment. "At least they're not trying to kill us," Kate muttered. The docking bay doors sealed, and a group of beings approached their ship. Jack's first look at the Altrans took his breath away. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with skin that shifted between different shades of blue like living water. Their faces were elegant and sharp, with large eyes that seemed to glow within a light. They wore robes that looked like they were made from starlight itself. Commander Vex stepped forward as Jack's crew gathered at the airlock. His presence felt enormous, not just physically but somehow mentally. When he spoke, his voice carried an authority that came from centuries of ruling the galaxy. "Captain Miller," Vex said, his tone polite but distant, like someone addressing a clever pet. "Your species is unknown to us. We have recorded your biological signatures and find them interesting." A floating device appeared beside Vex, projecting holographic displays of human anatomy. Jack could see his own body outlined in green light, with red sections marking what the aliens clearly saw as weaknesses. "Fascinating," Vex muttered, studying the data. "No natural armor plating. Bone density 40% below galactic average. Muscle fiber efficiency rating of only 6.2. Internal organs completely exposed. No redundant vital systems." He looked at Jack with what might have been curiosity. "How did your species survive to develop space travel?" Lieutenant Torres stepped forward, his engineering pride stung. "Our ship took a direct hit from a solar flare and we still kept her running for 3 days." Vex's expression didn't change. "Your technology appears to be several thousand years behind current galactic standards. Chemical rockets, nuclear fusion, primitive computers." The floating scanner showed detailed images of the Endeavour's systems. "We have museum pieces more advanced than your finest equipment." Jack felt his crew stirring behind him, their frustration building. He kept his voice calm. "We're tougher than we look, Commander." The sound that came from Vex's translator seemed like laughter, though his face remained serious. "Unlikely. Your people measure poorly against galactic standards. Look around you, Captain." Other Altrans had gathered to observe the humans. Some held scanning devices, others simply stared as if looking at zoo animals. Jack noticed smaller beings working in the background, creatures with thick gray skin and multiple arms handling maintenance tasks. They moved quickly and nervously, clearly servants or slaves. "Those are Keithans," Vex explained, following Jack's gaze. A warrior race we conquered 300 years ago. Even they are stronger than your species. We will assign you protected status and keep you safe from the real dangers out here. We don't need protection, Jack replied firmly. We need partnership. Partnership. Vex's expression shifted to something almost pitying. The other Altrans made sounds that their translators converted into various forms of amusement. Captain Miller, your species belongs in the archives with other primitive civilizations. The galaxy is full of threats that would destroy your entire race without effort. The hive swarms that devour planets. The machine intelligences that turn stars into weapons. The void hunters that exist between dimensions. He gestured toward the massive bay around them. This single ship could destroy your entire home fleet without taking damage. We have been fighting galactic wars since before your species discovered fire. Leave warfare to those evolved for it. Jack said nothing, but his jaw tightened slightly. Around him, his crew stood straighter, their hands instinctively moving toward weapons they no longer carried. Kate's eyes narrowed. Torres cracked his knuckles. These small human reactions didn't go unnoticed. Stress response detected, announced one of the scanning devices. Elevated heart rates, increased adrenaline production, muscle tension. Vex nodded approvingly. See? Your bodies prepare for violence even when facing impossible odds. A useful survival trait for primitives, but inefficient compared to rational analysis. The Altrans noted these responses as simple biological functions, filing them away as data points about human psychology. They had no idea they had just made their first critical error in judgment about humanity. Jack Miller and his crew weren't showing fear. They were showing restraint. 4 months had passed since the Endeavor's rescue, and humanity now sat at the very back of the Galactic Council chambers. The massive crystalline hall could hold representatives from thousands of worlds, but humans occupied only 3 small seats in the section marked for protected species. Captain Jack Miller, now promoted to ambassador, watched the ongoing debate with growing frustration. The war room hologram showed the galaxy painted in 2 colors, blue for council territory and sickening yellow-green for areas consumed by the hive. The yellow kept spreading. The Kepler sector has fallen, announced General Krell, the Altran military commander. His massive form dominated the center stage as battle footage played behind him. 17 colonies consumed. 4 million beings processed for biomass. The footage was horrifying. Hive ships looked like flying insects the size of cities, their surfaces crawling with smaller creatures. They landed on planets and simply devoured everything: buildings, forests, people. Within days, lush worlds became empty husks drifting through space. Our energy shields are useless, continued a reptilian commander from the Zirian Empire. Their bioweapons adapt faster than we can modify our defenses. They learn from every battle. Jack leaned forward in his seat. What about ground forces? Infantry support? The hall fell silent. Thousands of alien eyes turned toward the small human section. General Krell's expression showed the same pitying look Commander Vex had given them months ago. Ambassador Miller, Krell said slowly, as if speaking to a child, ground combat against the hive is suicide. They spawn warriors faster than we can kill them. Each creature stands 12 feet tall with natural armor that deflects plasma fire. They have acid for blood and claws that cut through battle steel. A hologram appeared showing a hive warrior in detail. The thing looked like a nightmare mixture of spider and mantis, with multiple arms ending in blade-like appendages. Its head was all teeth and compound eyes, and green fluid dripped from every surface. One warrior can kill 50 trained soldiers, added General Thex, a 4-armed creature covered in natural armor plating. Our strategy focuses on orbital bombardment and fleet actions. We evacuate ground forces before the hive can engage them directly. Jack stood up, his voice carrying across the massive chamber. What if we could hold ground positions? By time for evacuations? The laughter that erupted wasn't mean-spirited, just genuinely amused. These beings had been fighting galactic wars for millennia. The idea that humans, with their primitive weapons and fragile bodies, could contribute to military strategy struck them as adorable. Humans, Krell said gently, your military reports make fascinating reading. Projectile weapons that fire metal pellets. Chemical explosives that require physical contact to detonate. Combat vehicles with wheels and treads instead of hover technology. He gestured to his staff, who projected human military data for all to see. The display showed footage of human Marines in training. To alien eyes, they looked pathetically vulnerable. No natural weapons, no armor plating, no energy shields. Just soft flesh wrapped in fabric uniforms, carrying crude metal devices that threw chunks of metal at their enemies. "You fight like our ancestors did 10,000 years ago," observed Commander Zix of the Silicon Collective, her mechanical voice crackling with static. "Before we evolved past such primitive methods." Jack felt heat rising in his cheeks, but kept his voice steady. "Sometimes old methods work. Against other primitives, perhaps," Crow replied. "The Hive has consumed 47 civilizations. Species with natural armor, regeneration abilities, hive minds for coordination. All superior to human capabilities. All extinct now." The weight of that statement settled over the chamber. 47 entire civilizations, billions of beings, simply erased from existence. The Hive didn't take prisoners or negotiate. They just consumed everything organic and moved on. "However," Krall continued, his tone becoming more formal, "the Council appreciates Earth's offer of assistance. We will accept one regiment for observation duties." Jack blinked. "Observation duties?" "Colony Theta is scheduled for evacuation next week. The Hive will arrive within days after the civilians are removed. Your people can observe our defensive strategies and learn how galactic warfare operates." Krall's smile was genuinely kind. "Consider it educational." 3 days later, Lieutenant Tom Bradley stood on the transport pad of the battleship Sovereign's Edge, watching his Marines check their equipment one final time. The alien crew members gave them curious looks, like visitors at a historical reenactment. Tom had served 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Syria before joining the space program. Looking at his 150 Marines, he saw the same quiet professionalism that had served humanity well in countless conflicts. They cleaned their rifles with the same care their grandfathers had shown, checked their ammunition with practiced efficiency, and prepared their gear like professionals who knew their lives depended on it. "Sir," Sergeant Amy Roberts approached him, her expression carefully neutral. She'd been in the Army for 12 years before the Space Corps, had earned her stripes in combat zones most people couldn't find on a map. "The alien commander wants to brief us on our observation position." General Krall's aide, a tall blue being whose name Tom couldn't pronounce, led them to the tactical display room. The hologram showed Colony Theta, a peaceful farming world with rolling hills and crystal-clear rivers. Red markers indicated 3 defensive lines positioned around the main city. "Your forces will be stationed here," the aide said, pointing to a spot well behind all 3 lines. "At the civilian evacuation center. Perfectly safe. The first line will hold the Hive for 6 hours. The second line will buy another 4 hours. The third line is purely precautionary, the evacuation will be complete long before combat reaches that point." Tom studied the map carefully. The evacuation center sat in a valley surrounded by low hills. Good defensive terrain, multiple escape routes, clear fields of fire in all directions. His tactical mind automatically began planning positions and fields of fire, even though they were supposedly just there to watch. "What's our rules of engagement?" he asked. The aide looked confused. "Rules of what?" "If the Hive breaks through. What are our orders?" "Oh." The alien seemed genuinely puzzled by the question. "Retreat to the extraction point, of course. Your transport will be standing by for immediate evacuation. We can't risk losing humans to combat." Sergeant Roberts caught Tom's eye. Her expression said everything he was thinking. These aliens expected them to run at the first sign of trouble. They saw humans as fragile observers who would panic when real fighting started. "Understood," Tom replied evenly. As they boarded the dropship for Colony Theta, Roberts moved close enough to speak quietly. "Sir, are we really just going to watch while civilians get slaughtered if those lines break?" Tom checked his rifle one more time, the familiar weight of the weapon comforting in his hands. Around him, his Marines made their final preparations with the calm efficiency of professional soldiers. They trained for every possible scenario, had drilled urban combat and defensive positions until it became second nature. "We'll see, Roberts," he said quietly, watching the planet grow larger through the viewport. "We'll see." None of them knew they were about to teach the galaxy what humans were really capable of when cornered. The aliens had made their second critical error. They'd given humanity a battlefield and civilians to protect. Soon, they would learn the difference between being civilized and being weak. The first sign of trouble came at dawn when Colony Theta's artificial sun flickered and died. Lieutenant Tom Bradley lowered his binoculars and watched the sky turn an ugly shade of green. In the distance, something massive was blotting out the stars. "Contact," Sergeant Amy Roberts called out from her position on the hill. "Multiple bogies, incoming from the outer system." Through his scope, Tom could see them now, the Hive fleet. The alien ships looked like flying diseases, their surfaces writhing with organic growths and pulsing veins. Each bioship was the size of a city, trailing clouds of smaller attack craft behind them like deadly spores. The first defensive line, positioned 15 kilometers from the evacuation center, lit up with energy fire. Brilliant blue and white beams lanced out from Altran battle stations, striking the leading hive vessels. For a moment, Tom felt hope. The alien weapons were incredible, each shot carried more power than humanity's largest nuclear weapons. Then the hive ships began to change. "What the hell?" muttered Corporal Jake Williams, watching through his own scope. "They're adapting." The bioship's surfaces shifted and rippled like living skin. Where the energy beams struck, new armor formations appeared, crystal-like growths that absorbed the alien weapons and converted them into harmless light. Within minutes, the devastating Altran cannons were doing nothing more than giving the hive ships a light show. "First line is reporting weapon ineffectiveness," Robert said, monitoring the tactical channel. "They are switching to secondary systems." The secondary systems fared no better. Plasma cannons, particle beams, gravity weapons, everything the Galactic Council had developed over millennia proved useless against the hive's ability to evolve. The bioships pressed forward, releasing clouds of attack craft that swarmed over the alien positions like angry insects. Tom watched alien soldiers, beings he'd been told were superior warriors, abandon their positions in panic. These weren't cowards, they were professionals who understood that their weapons couldn't hurt the enemy. The logical response was tactical withdrawal. "First line is breaking," Roberts reported, her voice tight. "Altran forces in full retreat." Through the scope, Tom could see individual hive warriors now. They moved like nightmares made real, 12-foot-tall creatures that seemed part insect, part machine. Their natural armor gleamed like black metal, and they had too many limbs, all ending in blade-like appendages that could slice through battle steel. Worst of all, they moved with terrifying intelligence, coordinating their attacks with the precision of a military unit. "Second line's engaging," came the report over the radio. Different alien species manned the second defensive position, the four-armed Xerians with their heavy armor and the silicon-based collective with their mechanical bodies. Surely they would hold. They lasted 40 minutes. The Xerians' armor proved useless against hive acid that ate through metal like it was paper. The collective's mechanical bodies offered no protection against bioweapons that interfered with their electronic systems. One by one, defensive positions went silent. "Second line's breaking," Roberts called out. "Third line's pulling back to rally point Omega." That's when Tom really understood the situation. The third line wasn't even trying to fight. They were already retreating, following standard Galactic Council doctrine that preservation of forces was more important than holding ground. In 30 minutes, there would be nothing between the hive swarm and 50,000 terrified civilians. Around the evacuation center, those civilians huddled in makeshift shelters. Tom could see alien families pressed together, Altran children with their blue skin dark with fear, elderly Xerians too weak to stand, even some of the mechanical collective units powered down to conserve energy. They trusted that the three defensive lines would protect them until the evacuation ships arrived. Those ships were still 6 hours away. Tom's radio crackled with static, then General Kral's voice came through, "All units, fall back to rally point Omega. Repeat, full retreat authorized. Human forces, proceed immediately to extraction point Alpha. Transport standing by." Tom looked through his scope at the approaching hive swarm. Hundreds of the creatures were pouring through the broken defensive lines, moving with purpose toward the refugee center. Behind them came larger forms, things that looked like mobile weapons platforms grown from living tissue. He looked at his 150 Marines, scattered across defensive positions they dug despite being told they were just observers. These were professional soldiers who'd trained their entire careers for moments like this. They'd served in the worst places Earth had to offer, had held impossible positions against overwhelming odds. He looked at the refugees again. A small Altran child was crying, pressed against what was probably her mother. An elderly Xerian sat motionless, all four arms wrapped around a younger member of his family. The logical choice was obvious. Follow orders, retreat to the extraction point, and let the evacuation ships deal with the mess when they arrived. Save his own people and leave the alien civilians to their fate. After all, these same aliens had spent months treating humans like primitive curiosities. But Tom Bradley hadn't become a Marine to make logical choices. He joined to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. He keyed his radio MIC negative, command. "We're staying put." The response was immediate. "Lieutenant Bradley, you are ordered to withdraw immediately. You cannot engage the hive with primitive weapons. Roger that, Command, Tom replied calmly. Message received and understood. Roberts was grinning now, her rifle already trained on the approaching enemy. Around them, the other Marines were checking their weapons and adjusting their positions. Nobody asked for clarification. They all understood what staying meant. Finally, Roberts said quietly. Tom switched to the company frequency. All right, Marines. Listen up. We've got civilians to protect and bad guys incoming. The aliens think we can't fight. Time to prove them wrong. Corporal Williams laughed grimly from his machine gun position. About time we got to do our job, sir. Dig in, Marines, Tom ordered, chambering around in his rifle. Nobody gets through. In the distance, the hive swarm crested the last hill between them and the refugee center. Tom counted at least 300 of the creatures, with more following behind. The smart move would be to run. Instead, he aimed his supposedly primitive weapon at the lead creature and waited for it to come into range. The aliens were about to learn what humans did when they decided to stop being civilized. The first hive warrior crested the hill at exactly 0847 hours, its 12-foot frame moving with deadly grace across the open ground. Tom Bradley centered his rifle's crosshairs on the creature's head and squeezed the trigger. The .308 round punched through the warrior's skull like it was made of paper. Contact front. Tom shouted. Here they come. What followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The first wave of hive warriors hit the human positions like a living tsunami, 300 nightmarish creatures charging across open ground with claws extended and acid dripping from their mandibles. They expected to find the same panicked retreat they'd encountered from every other species. Instead, they ran straight into a wall of precisely aimed gunfire. Left flank, left flank. Sergeant Roberts called out, her rifle barking steadily. Each shot found its mark, dropping warriors that had shrugged off alt-ran energy weapons. These things bleed just fine. The Marines had positioned themselves perfectly. Tom had ignored the alien tactical doctrine entirely, instead setting up overlapping fields of fire that turned the approach to the refugee center into a killing ground. Every Marine knew exactly where his buddies were, every angle was covered, and every shot was calculated for maximum effect. Corporal Williams opened up with his M240 machine gun from a concealed position, the heavy round stitching across the charging horde. Come on, you ugly bugs, he shouted over the weapon's roar. Let's see how tough you really are. The hive warriors that reached the human lines found something they'd never encountered before. These weren't energy weapons that could be adapted to or psychic attacks that could be deflected. These were chunks of metal fired at hypersonic speeds, and the laws of physics didn't care how advanced the hive's evolution was. Williams, displacement left 30 meters. Tom ordered, dropping another warrior with a headshot. They're trying to flank your position. The machine gunner grabbed his weapon and moved without question, setting up in a new firing position just as a group of warriors tried to circle around his old spot. The hive creatures found empty ground instead of their target, then found themselves caught in crossfire from 3 different Marines. What amazed the alien observers wasn't just the effectiveness of human weapons, it was how the Marines fought as a single organism. They moved and communicated with an efficiency that put telepathic species to shame. When Corporal Davis's rifle jammed, Private Johnson was already covering his position. When Sergeant Thompson spotted a weak point in their line, he was repositioning troops before the hive could exploit it. Second wave incoming. Roberts shouted. Bigger ones this time. Tom looked through his scope and cursed. These new creatures were massive, 20 feet tall with thicker armor and what looked like organic cannons growing from their backs. Behind them came something even worse, a bioship, a living vessel the size of a small building that pulsed with hostile intent. Williams. Tom called out. Remember those demo charges you've been carrying? The corporal grinned, already pulling the explosive packs from his belt. Way ahead of you, sir. While Roberts and her squad kept the smaller warriors busy, Williams sprinted across open ground toward the bioship. Hive acid sizzled past him, burning holes in the dirt, but he kept moving. When he reached the creature, he slapped the charges against what looked like vital organs and dove for cover. The explosion sent biomatter flying in all directions, and the massive creature collapsed with what sounded like a scream. How did you know where to place those charges? Asked Private Lee, still firing at the advancing warriors. Same place I'd put them on any other vehicle, Williams replied, reloading his machine gun. Right where it had hurt the most. But the hive kept coming. For every warrior the Marines dropped, 2 more appeared. They tried new tactics, aerial attacks from flying creatures, burrowing assaults from underground, even psychological warfare that projected images of fear and despair. None of it worked. The flying creatures found themselves picked off by Marines who trained in anti-aircraft procedures. The burrowing attacks failed because Sergeant Thompson had positioned motion sensors around the perimeter. As for the psychological warfare, the Marines seemed completely immune. "They're trying to get in our heads," Roberts observed, watching strange lights dance at the edge of her vision. "Not working too well." "Humans don't have psychic receivers," Tom replied, putting another round through a warrior center mass. "Hard to mess with minds you can't connect to." Aboard the command ship orbiting Colony Theta, Commander Vex stared at the battlefields in absolute disbelief. His staff of experienced military officers stood speechless as they watched 150 humans hold off a hive assault that should have overwhelmed them in minutes. "Sir," his aide reported, his voice shaking slightly, "human casualties are minimal. Hive casualties are extensive." "This is impossible," Vex muttered. "Their weapons are primitive. Their armor is non-existent. They have no energy shields, no advanced targeting systems, no psychic coordination." On the main screen, they watched Tom Bradley calmly direct his forces while under heavy fire, his voice steady and professional as he called out targets and coordinated movements. Around him, Marines moved with the precision of a machine, each one covering the others, adapting to new threats in real time. "They are not retreating," Vex said, more to himself than to anyone else. "Why aren't they retreating? Any rational commander would have withdrawn by now." His tactical officer, a being with 4 arms and advanced combat implants, leaned forward. "Sir, they appear to be winning." Down on the surface, Tom keyed his radio one more time. "All stations, this is Alpha 1. Status report. Alpha 2, holding position. Ammunition at 60%. Alpha 3, minor casualties. Still in the fight. Alpha 4, could use more targets if you've got them." Tom smiled grimly as he watched the latest wave of hive warriors hesitate at the edge of the killing ground. For the first time in the battle, the creatures seemed uncertain. They'd thrown everything they had at these strange bipeds, and nothing had worked. The humans weren't just surviving. They were excelling. And for the first time in galactic history, the hive was learning what it felt like to be afraid. "Dig deeper, Marines," Tom ordered. "This isn't over yet." The aliens watching from orbit were about to witness something that would change their understanding of warfare forever. They were about to see what happened when humans stopped playing nice. The evacuation ships arrived 6 hours late, their massive hulls blocking out the morning sun as they descended through Colony Theta's atmosphere. Commander Vex stood in the lead transport's observation deck, expecting to find a massacre. The tactical displays had gone silent 4 hours ago, and everyone assumed the worst. Instead, he found something that broke every rule of galactic warfare. The refugee camp was intact. 50,000 alien civilians sat in organized groups, being tended to by human medics who moved between them with calm efficiency. Around the perimeter, scattered across 3 square kilometers, lay the remains of what intelligence estimated had been over 800 hive warriors. "By the ancestors," whispered General Krall, his blue skin pale with shock. They held. Lieutenant Tom Bradley sat on an ammunition crate, methodically cleaning his rifle with the same precision he'd shown during the battle. His uniform was torn and blood-stained, field bandages covered cuts on his arms and face, but his hands were steady as he worked. Around him, 77 surviving Marines maintained defensive positions, their weapons still trained outward as if expecting another attack. The alien reinforcements landed with all the ceremony of a major military operation. Hover tanks deployed in formation, energy weapons powered up, and thousands of heavily armed soldiers took defensive positions. They'd come prepared for a massive rescue operation and cleanup of human casualties. They found human soldiers still at their posts, still watching the horizon for threats. Commander Vex approached Tom slowly, his military escort fanned out behind him. The human didn't stand or salute, he simply continued cleaning his weapon until the job was done. Only then did he look up. "Commander," Tom said quietly. "Glad you could make it." Vex stared at the battlefield around them. Hive bioships lay scattered like broken monuments, their living hulls shattered by explosives placed with surgical precision. Warrior corpses formed neat piles where human machine gun positions had cut them down in overlapping fields of fire. The tactical positioning was perfect, every angle covered, every approach controlled. "Casualties?" Vex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 73 KIA, 4 to 6 wounded, Tom replied matter-of-factly, gesturing toward a row of covered bodies. "All refugees secure. Area cleared of hostiles. 73 dead." out of 150 Marines who had faced a force that should have killed them in minutes. Vex had lost more soldiers than that during routine training exercises. The Hive warriors, Vex said slowly. How many? Sergeant Roberts approached from her position, her own rifle slung across her back. Conservative estimate? 800 confirmed kills. We stopped counting after the bioship started retreating. Retreating. The Hive had retreated. In 3,000 years of galactic warfare, no one had ever seen the Hive retreat from ground combat. They consumed worlds or died trying. Those were the only two outcomes anyone had ever recorded. How? Vex asked, staring at Tom Bradley. This human lieutenant had just accomplished what 3 full alien divisions couldn't manage. Tom stood, shouldering his weapon with practiced ease. Around him, his surviving Marines began policing the battlefield with the same calm professionalism they'd shown during the fight. They moved like they'd done this 1,000 times before. We're not weak, Commander, Tom said simply. We're civilized. There's a difference. The battle footage reached the Galactic Council within hours. Every species with hyperspace communication received the recording simultaneously, humans in primitive armor, using chemical weapons, holding impossible defensive positions against overwhelming odds. The footage showed Tom Bradley calling artillery strikes on his own position and walking out of the smoke still firing. It showed Marines using combat knives when they ran out of ammunition. Most importantly, it showed them winning. The reaction was immediate and galaxy-wide. The Ultran High Command requested human military advisors within the first day. The Zerian Empire offered exclusive trade agreements in exchange for human tactical training. Even the Silicon Collective, beings who considered organic life forms inferior, sent diplomatic envoys asking for defense contracts. Species that had never heard of humanity began studying human military history. They discovered records of wars fought on a scale that dwarfed most galactic conflicts. World War II alone had involved more combatants than the Hive had fielded in their last 10 campaigns. They found documentation of battles where humans had held impossible positions, won against overwhelming odds, and turned defeats into victories through sheer stubborn determination. Most disturbing of all, they realized that humans had been fighting each other for millennia. Every tactic the Marines had used against the Hive, every strategy that had seemed so innovative and deadly, had been developed in conflicts between human nations. These weren't weapons designed for galactic warfare, they were weapons designed to kill other humans. 6 months later, the Galactic War Council convened in emergency session. The massive crystalline chamber had been reconfigured, with human representatives now seated at the primary strategic table instead of in the observer section. General Tom Bradley, his promotion had come with the highest military commendation the council could award, stood at the center of the chamber. His new uniform bore decorations from 17 different species, each one recognizing his tactical brilliance during the colony theta defense. The key to defeating the Hive, he explained, his voice carrying the same calm professionalism he'd shown that day on the battlefield, is understanding that evolution doesn't always mean improvement. They adapt to energy weapons, so we use kinetic weapons. They jam psychic communications, so we use radio and hand signals. They're designed to fight advanced civilizations, not primitive ones. Around the table, the galaxy's finest military minds hung on his every word. These beings had commanded fleets across star systems, had conquered entire sectors, had fought wars that lasted centuries. Now they listened to a human explain warfare like students in a classroom. But the real advantage, Tom continued, is that we understand violence on a level most species have evolved past. Humans spent hundreds of thousands of years as persistence hunters. We chased our prey across continents until it collapsed from exhaustion. We developed weapons not for defense, but for killing things bigger and stronger than ourselves. He gestured to the holographic display showing human military doctrine. Every human child learns about wars that consumed entire continents. We study tactics developed by generals who commanded millions of soldiers. We practice violence until it becomes art. In the back of the chamber, Commander Vex sat quietly, finally understanding what he'd witnessed. The human Marines hadn't been fighting desperately for their lives. They'd been doing what came naturally to them, what their entire species had spent eons perfecting. The difference, Tom concluded, is that most species become civilized by evolving past their violent nature. Humans became civilized by choosing to control it. We're not peaceful because we can't fight. We're peaceful because we're very, very good at fighting, and we know what happens when we don't hold back. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't survived despite being weak. They'd survived because they were apex predators who had simply been playing nice. The Hive, meanwhile, had learned something new as well. For the first time in their existence, they'd encountered prey that fought back effectively. Their bioships now avoided systems with human military presence, and their expansion had slowed to a crawl. After the session ended, Vex approached Tom in the corridor. "General Bradley," he said formally, "I owe you an apology." Tom smiled, the same quiet expression he'd worn while cleaning his rifle after the battle. "No need, Commander. You couldn't have known. We did our best to hide it." "Why?" Vex asked. "Why hide what you were capable of?" Tom looked out through the massive viewport at the stars beyond, where human ships now patrolled alongside alien fleets, where human tactics were being taught in military academies across the galaxy. "Because," he said quietly, "the most dangerous predators are the ones that look harmless until they decide not to be." The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity was no longer the cute primitive species that needed protection. They were the species you called when protection wasn't enough anymore.